Hello everybody, welcome back to the Better Happy podcast for managers, hosted by myself, Mike Jones. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about something which I've talked about a lot in previous episodes, which is burnout. But in particular today, I'm going to go into the 2 essential ingredients that lead to burnout, and also what we can do to get past it if we've got those ingredients present either in ourselves or we recognize that these ingredients might be present in other people within our teams. So it's my belief from my personal experience and from working with many other people, this is hundreds of managers and thousands of employees, that these 2 essential ingredients have to be present in order for burnout to happen. And it's also my belief that burnout isn't just the outcome of working too much. So those are the things that we're going to go into in this episode. But to start off with, let's dig a little deeper into why burnout is so prevalent now. So most of us, if we work in the professional world or we own businesses or we're in a leadership or management position, have heard the term burnout numerous times over recent weeks and months and years. And the reality is that if we go back in time, maybe just 10 years, burnout wasn't a hot topic. It wasn't really something that was talked about other than the context of people skidding around car parks in their cars and burning out their tyres. But it certainly wasn't something that we talked about as a psychological issue that can happen in the workplace. So the reason for this is, and it's really vital that we understand this because we need to understand why a problem happens in order to address it, is that things have changed. And what I'd like you to do is picture the flow of work which is available to us all as a river. And there's 2 ways in which we can change the speed and the volume of water that's flowing through that river. So the first one is we can make the river wider. And what we're doing here is we're creating a larger volume of work. So if you think about the internet now and how connected we are to the world all the time, it means that we can do more work in across a wider time. We can work when we go home, we can take our work with us, we can think about work more when we're at home, we've got our wireless devices in our pockets, so we can work for a longer time. But then also what's happened is imagine that the river's steeper, so the work that we can do, we can also do 10 times faster than we used to, probably 100 times faster. So not only can we do work across a wider range of time, so there's more of it, we can also do more work in that time, so it's flowing faster as well. So it's the combination of these 2 things which is making burnout an issue. And it's my belief that throughout history, these 2 ingredients that lead to burnout have been prevalent in a lot of us, but the river hasn't been fast enough or wide enough for them to become a major issue. So it's a new challenge. It's a new challenge that we face. It's only now, thanks to technology, that we can really burn out. And I'm sure it was possible in the past, but it certainly wasn't possible on a mass scale because people had to switch off from work. If you wasn't at work, you was at home. People could only work so fast, so it was almost impossible to work at a speed in which your brain can feel completely fatigued. So this is a new kind of environment in which we all live and work in. So it's now this new thing that we have to think about, making sure that we're not working too much when it's possible to work so much that we can experience burnout. If you think about physical health, it's very similar, right? So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was relatively difficult not to have a basic level of physical health because we moved a lot, we ate natural foods. I mean, that's changed maybe more than 30 years ago, but 100 years ago, we could only eat natural foods. We didn't have processed food available to us en masse. We had to move for work. We didn't have phones and wireless devices to keep us busy, so we used to keep ourselves active and socialising with others. Now we live in an environment where we don't have to move. We can eat processed foods. We've got phones to distract us from actually connecting with people so we can be lonely. So we're in a new environment for physical health as well. So what that means is we've got to figure out how to look after our health in this modern environment. And it's the same with burnout. It's only now that we can actually work so hard that we get burnout, so we need to make sure we understand what leads to that and prevent it from happening. So these are two vital things to understand. Now, the next piece to understand is that burnout is not caused by hard work. Burnout is not caused by working too much. Okay, it's really important that we understand that. And if you think that burnout is caused by hard work and people working too much, then many businesses just wouldn't exist, because many businesses are built on people working too many hours, working really hard, and just doing things that most of us don't believe most of us in normal jobs would never do. But there's plenty of people that work crazy hours and they love it, they enjoy it, and they don't get burnt out. So that shows us that although working a lot of hours might be something that we see in people that burn out, it's not the actual cause. Okay, and the actual cause of burnout is the emotional exhaustion that people go through from having a low level of self-esteem and not believing in themselves, which leads to them overworking. So yes, we see that people are working too much and not switching off, but it's not the actual work that gets them burnt out. It's the listening to this internal dialogue that they've got in their minds that leads to them burnout. It's working because they feel like they have to. It's working because they're stressed. It's working because they don't feel like they're doing a good enough job that leads to burnout, not the actual working itself. So it's almost like the people that are working hard that don't burn out, they're doing it because they enjoy it. So they're rowing their boat down the river and they're doing it because they're enjoying the scenery and they're having a great time and they're loving the progress that they're making towards their goal. The people that are burning out are rowing their boat down the river because they're terrified, because they don't think they're doing a good enough job, because there's a tsunami coming, because they believe there's a tsunami coming, or because they believe that if they stop rowing, other people are going to see that they're not a great rower and they're going to fail. And these two people are both doing the same thing. They're both rowing, but one person's enjoying the process. One person's doing it, even though they might put on the face that they're enjoying it, they're doing it because they're stressed, because they don't feel they're good enough, because they don't feel that they're worthy. And it's only that latter party that are going to get burnt out. So that's a vital thing to understand. It's not just the working, it's the internal dialogue that's going on that's leading to the working. So what are the two ingredients that are vital to creating the melting pot for burnout? So the first one is passion. You've got to be passionate about your work. Okay, so when people are passionate about their work, the risk of burnout becomes a reality. If people aren't passionate about their work, it's very unlikely that they're going to get burnt out. An example here is I used to be in the military. I did 2 back-to-back tours of Afghanistan with maybe 2 months in between. So I spent a year there pretty much. And sometimes I was working 20 hours a day, getting 3 hours sleep. So he was working a lot of hours, like crazy hours, a lot of volume of work and speed of work and important work as well. But I wasn't overly passionate about it. I cared about doing a good job. I cared about making sure we got the results that we needed to get. And I cared about making sure that the right people were safe. But I wasn't going to bed just taking this work home with me, really. I mean, when you're there, you live it. But I was able to switch off because I just didn't really care that much. And I wasn't that obsessed with the goals and success and growth that I could have this burden on my shoulders all the time about work. It was easy for me to switch off. When I was away from work, I was away from work. If I was passionate about the job or passionate about my career or passionate about the business, highly passionate, then it's a different story. And this is what I found in my first business. So when I opened my first business, which was by all means nowhere near as stressful as the military on surface level, I found out that, I had a lot of passion, and then I found out that I had the second ingredient, which I'm going to mention to you in a moment, and it's that led to me over a period of 4 years getting really, really burnt out. But without the passion piece, I wouldn't have worked hard, right? So I didn't work super, super hard in the military. I certainly didn't work to an extent where I was going to get unhealthy. But in my career, in my business, I did, because I had the passion piece. So we need that passion piece, right? And if you've got staff that aren't passionate, they're not going to get burnt out. They're also not going to work particularly hard, but they'll probably do what's required of them to get paid. Now, the second ingredient that we need to experience burnout, I'm saying this like we want it. Of course we don't, but a lot of us have got it, is a low level of self-belief, self-esteem, or self-confidence. That's 3 different ways of saying the same thing, right? So here's where this is interesting. A lot of people hear that and go, well, my managers don't have a low level of self-confidence, or I don't have a low level of self-confidence. So again, I'll go into my personal example. Before I opened my business, I was a non-commissioned officer in the army. I would present in front of large groups. I was physically fit. I'm confident to talk to people. I'm relatively outgoing. I'd say I'm a bit of an introvert, but I'm happy to go and meet people. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. So people would probably say, and maybe even I would say to myself at that point, that I'm actually quite a confident individual. I don't have any self-esteem issues. But when I opened my first business, all of a sudden I had the responsibility to achieve results. Okay, and what I mean by results is financial targets, goals, help people transform their health and their fitness. My first business was a gym. And I've no longer just got to achieve short-term things, which is here's a list, get the task done. Because even if I'm lacking in self-esteem, if I've got short-term things to achieve, which most of us do before we get to leadership or management roles or owning businesses, I achieve the things in a day or in the week. So it doesn't matter if I believe in myself or not. I'm going to do the thing, and then I'm going to see that I've done it. So it's going to make me feel like, okay, I can do that. But once I start to have longer term objectives and strategic objectives and responsibilities, if I've got a low level of self-esteem that's maybe been hiding away, that's going to quickly come to the surface, right? If I've got issues around money or self-belief or self-confidence that didn't really show themselves when I just had a job and I was getting paid a salary and I only had to do short-term tasks, then they're going to start to come to the surface. And that's exactly what happens for a lot of managers and leaders. They think they're confident, or new business owners, they think they're confident, but once they start to have these longer term objectives, they realise they've got a lack of self-belief. They realise they've got an issue with money. They realise that they're lacking in confidence. And this can happen, late 20s, early 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It doesn't discriminate against age. It can happen at any point once we put ourselves in these positions. It often happens after people find what they're passionate about, because when they're passionate about their careers or their jobs, then they naturally find their ways to leadership and management positions, and then they find themselves in these positions where it's like, oh, I am lacking in a bit of confidence around here, and I didn't realise I had this issue. So with me for the gym, I found the passion. My first business, I found the passion, and then I started the gym, and then I realised now looking back, that I had massive self-esteem issues with my ability, with my self-belief. So first of all, did I believe that it was going to be successful, that I was going to be able to grow a team and bring in enough money? No, I didn't. So I just worked all the hours that God sends. Did I realise that did I believe I was doing a good enough job? No, I didn't. I always did a good job, but it was never good enough. So every task always dragged on and on and on, and every piece of work felt stressful because no matter how well I did it, I still kept to the end and felt it's not good enough. I need to do more. Did I believe in my value? No, I didn't. So was I charging enough for the services that we were providing? No, I wasn't. But I wanted to constantly make the quality better. And that can only be done, quality can't compromise with cost. So you can only provide quality if you're charging decent prices, which I didn't feel confident to do. Did I believe I was worthy of the money that the business was making? No, so I just worked more and more and more all the time. And it's very easy to see how this lack of self-belief and self-esteem can very quickly lead to somebody being stressed and burnt out, overwhelmed and anxious. And I didn't realise it for me that this went on for 4 or 5 years, and I was justifying it to myself. So I was like, I need to work more because it's my business, and I need to make this thing 10 times better so that I can charge the prices that we need to charge, etc., etc. And what it led to was me not charging enough, really overthinking charging what I should have been charging, so that we were making the profit we needed to make to pay the people that we needed to deliver the service that we wanted to deliver. It led to me working all the hours that God sends and saying that, I can just work on the weekends because it's the business and it needs to be looked after and things need to be better. But really, it was just this ongoing, I was the person rowing up the river with the tsunami coming to me. I constantly felt like everything was going to implode, everything was going to go wrong. I wasn't doing a good enough job, so I had to work. And it's very easy to see visually that if somebody's doing that and they're just working more and more and more, and they're doing it because they don't think they're good enough, because they think everything's going to go wrong, because they think that's the only way they can be successful, it's very easy to see how that's not sustainable. In the short to medium term, that's going to start to have a negative impact on the person and their energy and their confidence and how they are around other people. And then in the long term, it's going to lead to burnout, as it did with me. And burnout is when you do that for so long that you just get completely and utterly emotionally exhausted, and then you just give up. You just get so tired and fed up and drained that you just stop. You just, there's different symptoms of burnout. Some people have physical symptoms where they literally can't walk or move anymore. For me, I just stopped caring and hated myself because I didn't care, because that's not who I am, and eventually walked away from that business. So this is what happens in leadership and in management, particularly in management, and even at a senior level. You get people that get promoted to these senior positions because they're passionate, because they care about what they do, because they want to get results. Once they step into these positions, they get added responsibilities and a more strategic focus on their job to get long-term results. And then all of a sudden, lack of self-confidence, lack of self-esteem, lack of self-belief that they didn't realise they suffered with before really starts to bubble to the surface. So you end up with new managers and leaders doubting their ability, not thinking they're doing a good enough job, thinking that they're going to get found out one day for not being good enough, thinking that it's all about to get the rug's going to get pulled from underneath their feet. So they've got all this language, this internal dialogue going on in their minds. And then what that leads to is they avoid conflict, they overcommit to work, they say yes to too much because they think that's the only way that they can stay valid. They refuse to challenge meetings getting put in their diary, so you end up with teams of just of great people just sitting in meetings all day, every day, because nobody's got the confidence to say, no, I don't need to be in that meeting. And then this has a negative cascade effect down throughout the business, right? Because if you've got senior managers and senior leaders overcommitting and lacking self-esteem, how does that get passed down? It gets passed down as too much work. It gets passed down as overcommitted teams. It gets passed down as a lack of clarity on what actually needs to be done. So it's a real problem, and it typically will strike the people in your business or in your organization that are the most passionate, or potentially you as well. So historically, I think these issues were still there. I think we still had passionate people that were lacking in self-confidence and self-esteem, but they weren't going to get burnt out because they couldn't work too much. They had to switch off from work, because when you were away from the office, you were away from the office. You had to switch off. You had no choice. Today, in today's world, it's very different. People can work all day, every day. They can be connecting to their emails when they're on holiday. They can be thinking about work when they're at home. They can be working on their laptops. And when people don't think they're doing a good enough job, or that they need to do a better job, they'll take that work home and it will just creep. It will just constantly creep and creep and creep. And saying that the only way to fix this is for businesses to reduce workload on the teams kind of skips the issue. And the issue is that people lack self-confidence and self-esteem. So what we need to do is we need to think about, well, what can we do to address that? So first of all, do we want to address the passion piece? Probably not. We want our people to be passionate, right? What we don't want is our passionate people to burn out. That's the worst thing. So we don't want to address that piece. What we do want to do is be cautious of, is it genuine passion? So I think you'll find with a lot of people, maybe yourself, and this is something that's worth checking in on, you'll tell yourself you're being driven by passion, but actually what you're being driven by is this desire to prove you're worthy to people. So you have to work really hard to prove that you're valid, to prove that to prove people wrong, or to keep your parents happy, or whatever it might be. So first of all, just dig into your passion, right? So, and dig into the passion of your people as well, and just make sure that the thing that's driving you is a genuine desire to make this thing that you're working on a success. You genuinely care about the work you do, and it's not that hidden behind this insatiable desire to prove yourself to people, because that in itself leads to burnout. So you make sure that it's genuine passion. But if you're genuinely career focused and you're really passionate about your career or your business, then great. Don't try and change that. Just be conscious of the fact that it can lead to you sacrificing yourself a little bit to put the business and the other people first. Now, the second piece we certainly need to do something about, and that's the low self-esteem piece. And 9 out of 10 people have this issue, right? So don't feel bad if you're lacking in self-confidence. Our nation is put together in a way that nurtures low levels of self-confidence, right? You're taught from a young age at school to not to follow your ideas and your dreams and your visions, but to follow the process that's been laid out to you. You're constantly graded and then told where you're not doing a good job. So it's not surprising that people come out of school not having a very high level of self-belief. And the thing is this, right? So when you get to that management role or that leadership role, or you own a business, you're no longer being paid mainly to just do tasks. You're now being paid to make visions become reality. And that requires confidence and self-belief. Okay, it requires you to make decisions, to be strategic, and to believe in your ability to get that result. Hence the reason many of us don't realize that we've got confidence issues until we get to management, leadership, or business ownership. So they're going to present themselves, and what we don't want to do is let them become our worst enemy. We don't want to let them lead to burnout like they did with me, which I'm happy for now because it's forced me to learn more about this subject and overcome it. Because the other option could have been I quit earlier before I was burnt out and just say, oh, that was a bit too stressful for me. But the reality is my low self-confidence is keeping me smaller than who I'm meant to be. And that's what we don't want to happen to you. So we don't want you to run away from them or your teams, and we don't want you to let them burn you out. Okay, what we want to do is use them to grow and to learn about ourselves. So how can we improve our self-esteem? Well, there's 3 tips I'm going to give you now, but the key thing to understand is this, is that the only way you improve your self-esteem is by proving it wrong. It's by doing stuff. It's through action. So I'm going to give you some tips, but it's not the tips in themselves that's going to make you feel more confident and let this self-esteem, this low self-esteem part of you hold you back. It's the proving to that part that it's wrong. And another tip around here, just before I get into the tips or mindset piece, is there's nothing wrong with, get it into your mind that there's nothing wrong with you for having self-doubt. Okay, it'll always be there, and there's nothing that anybody can do that can make it go away. It'll always be there. You're always going to have self-doubt. You're always going to have a level of imposter syndrome. You're always going to have a level of lack of confidence, and that's just the evolutionary part of your brain or of your mind that's trying to keep you safe at all times. So there's nothing wrong with it having that, and it's always going to be there. And the world's most confident people have this. They just create a healthy relationship with it. So get that into your mind. You're not trying to get rid of these little demons that sit on your shoulder telling you that you're not good enough. You're just trying to create a healthy relationship with them. Okay, here's 3 tips that we can do to help with that. Now, the first one is to ask for help and seek guidance. If you look at the world's most successful people, business owners, mentors, coaches, they all have mentors and coaches. They all have communities of people that they talk to. Because when you talk about these issues, you work through them. If you don't talk about them, they stay in your mind and you justify them. They're very clever, right? Your mind's a very clever thing. So it justifies these thoughts. You buy into them, you believe them, and they create the narrative for your life. What happens with people in leadership and management roles and business ownership roles, and I've been guilty of this, is we feel that if we ask for help, it's a sign of weakness, and that we can't do that in these positions. But the opposite is true, right? By asking for help or by talking about the things that we're struggling with to somebody, we're actually showing strength and fortitude. So you've got to ask for help. You've got to talk through these ideas. The second one, which helps with the first one but doesn't bypass it, so don't use 2 instead of 1, is to write down your negative thoughts. So let's say, for example, you want to say no to a meeting because you know it's just a waste of time. The negative thoughts are going to tell you you're lacking in self-belief, that if you say no to this meeting, people are going to think you're not working hard. And then it's going to, and that's eventually going to lead to, if you follow this train of thought, you losing your job. And this is how our minds work, right? They catastrophize. So if you write this thought process down, you'll start to see it for how ridiculous that it is. My example with a gym could be, you can't put your prices up because everybody will leave and the other gyms aren't charging that much. It was ridiculous, and I actually did put my price up 3 times, and all these bad things didn't happen, right? But if I'd have written these thoughts down, then I could have started to see them for how ridiculous they are and start to work through these issues. So what it does is it creates distance between you and your illogical, irrational, negative self-thoughts. So you've got to write them down and you can work through them. So that's a really kind of powerful way to get past them. And then number 3 is to reframe your thought processes and put you as the priority. Now, people think that this sounds selfish, right? Because we're taught from a young age that it's selfish to think about me and that we always need to put other people first. And in the modern world, that's not a very helpful thought process, because we end up being unhealthy, we end up being stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, and burnt out if we constantly put our business, our career, and everybody else ahead of us. So take the thing that you're passionate about. Let's give the 2 most common examples: family and work or career. Take those 2 things, right, that you tend to put above yourself, and reframe them so that you are the most important thing. And how you do that is you logically explain to yourself that for you to be the best professional, you need to look after yourself. For you to be the best business owner, you've got to look after yourself. I mean, what's the number 1 reason that businesses shut in the first year? Because the owners get burnt out. So you want to overcome the main issue, you've got to look after yourself. What's the main reason we lose good managers and leaders? Because they burn out. What's the main reason parents don't have a great relationship with their kids? Because they work too much, they're stressed, they're unhealthy, and they haven't got time for them, right? So you've got to put yourself first. So instead of just letting yourself put everything else that you're passionate about ahead of you in your priority list, you've got to embrace the mindset of being sensibly selfish, okay? And you've got to say, right, yes, I need to give time to people. I need to be a good professional. I need to be a good parent or sibling or partner. I need to be a great business owner. But in order for that to happen, I've got to be the best version of me. And for that to happen, I've got to look after myself. I've got to work through my issues. I've got to be aware of my mind. I've got to look after my body if possible. etc., etc. And what's going to happen if I don't do that is I'm no longer going to be the great professional. I'm no longer going to be able to run the business. I'm no longer going to be happy when I'm around my children or my partner, and my longevity is going to decrease, so I'm not going to be able to spend as much time with them over the lifespan. So those are the 3 tips. You've got to ask for help, you've got to write your thoughts down, and you've got to be sensibly selfish. You've got to reframe these issues and put you as the priority. Remember, the 2 ingredients that lead to burnout are, number 1, passion, which is great, we don't want to get rid of it, and number 2, a lack of self-esteem, self-confidence, or self-belief, which is a very human part of being human. We're not going to get rid of number 2, but what we can do is work through it so that it no longer holds us back or leads to us working in a way that is unhealthy and unsustainable. Your work and your life should feel like an enjoyable challenge. It should feel hard if you're doing meaningful things, but you should be enjoying that challenge. Are you going to enjoy it all of the time? No, but most of the time it should feel like a fulfilling and rewarding journey. If your life and business or job feel like an uphill battle where you don't feel good about yourself, your self-esteem is getting in the way. And that's wrong, okay? It shouldn't feel like that, especially in the modern developed world. If you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be born into a wealthy developed society, and if you're watching this video, the chances are that you are. So the world doesn't want you to struggle. The world wants you to find what you're good at and do that and enjoy it and be a positive person to the people around you through that process. That can't be done if you're going through life being grinded down by the negative self-thoughts that we get when we let low self-esteem and low self-belief be the overriding dictators or commentators on our life. So don't buy into the notion that working too much is what leads to burnout. If you're suffering with it yourself, we've gone through some really good tips there to help us start to understand and get past it. If you recognize that your team members or your employees or your colleagues are potential concerns for getting burnt out, then hopefully what you've taken from this podcast is going to give you plenty of food for thought and tips to help them address that. And of course, the easy tip is just get them to listen to this podcast. You can also head over to betterhappy.co.uk and click on the free resources link. There's 2 tools there that I think are fantastic for helping people to start making a positive journey away from burnout and towards fulfillment. And that is the Cadence Calendar and the Proactivity Planner, which is particularly useful for leaders and managers. And what these 2 tools do is they help you become sensibly selfish and look after yourself, and they help you start to plan your time to be more strategic and not just be constantly busy and stressed and burnt out all the time. I hope that episode has been useful for you and helped you better understand the concept of burnout, why it's a problem, what you can do about it. And my key takeaway, as always, is to remember that life, teams, and business are better happy.